Good evening. All right, come on over just a little bit. Okay, thank you. We have a whole team here today. All right. I'm Jennifer Homendy, and I'm chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. And with me tonight is John Lovell, our investigator in charge. We also have Clint Crookshanks and Leonie Benitez Cardona, both of which are aerospace engineers for the NTSB and really specialists in structures, including looking at the airframe, the door plug, and the surrounding structure around the door plug. Now, one of the NTSB's core values is transparency. We believe when we have factual information that has been verified, that it's our duty to provide it to the public and to the media. And so tonight we have a lot of information that we want to share. First, I'm going to provide a summary of the event from the flight data recorder. We're going to talk about what our survival factors group did today, and then I'm going to talk about what our systems group did today, and then we'll have some discussions about structures and what the structures group did. So for the summary of the flight data recorder, from the flight data recorder, I'm going to read it. At 17:06 and 47 seconds Pacific Standard Time, the aircraft departed runway 28 left at Portland International Airport. At 17:12 and 33 seconds, the recorded cabin pressure dropped from 14.09 to 11.64 pounds per square inch, when the aircraft was at approximately 14,830 feet and 271 knots. The cabin altitude greater than 10,000 feet warning activated. At 17:12 and 34 seconds, the master caution activated. The cabin pressure dropped to 9.08 psi at approximately 14,850 feet and 271 knots. At 17:12 and 52 seconds, the master caution deactivated. At 17:13 and 41 seconds, the aircraft continued to climb and reached a maximum altitude of 16,320 feet and began to descend. The airspeed was 276 knots. At 17:13 and 56 seconds, the selected altitude changed from 23,000 feet to 10,000 feet. At 17:14 and 35 seconds, the master caution activated for 3 seconds. At 17:16 and 56 seconds, the aircraft began a left turn from 121 degrees. The altitude was approximately 10,120 feet. At 17:17, the aircraft descended below 10,000 feet. At 17:18 and 5 seconds, the aircraft altitude was approximately 9,050 feet, and the airspeed was 271 knots. The cabin altitude greater than 10,000 feet warning deactivated. The cabin pressure was 10.48 psi. At 17:26 and 46 seconds, the aircraft landed on runway 28 left at Portland International Airport. Now, the survival factors team interviewed the remaining 2 flight attendants, one from the aft of the aircraft and one from forward. Their interview and discussion was consistent with the interviews of the other 2 flight attendants. They also reported pretty significant crew communications challenges during the event. They didn't know what was occurring. They were certainly concerned, they stated, about the 4 unaccompanied minors, and their focus was on them and the 3 lap children at the time. The 2 flight attendants in the aft outboard seats in the aft galley had difficulty seeing what was going on in the cabin and in the aisle. It's very difficult from that location to see anything. There is a very, very small mirror provided to look down the aisle. It's not sufficient. So it was very difficult for them to see. The flight attendants mentioned that the communications was so poor that they felt like they really needed guidance and information, and it was a pretty terrifying event. Now, with that said, I know that a lot of media is reaching out to the flight attendants. The interviews have been very emotional. This was a really significant event with 0 information at the time. There's a lot of trauma that they are working through. It's going to be a long process. It was terrifying. I would ask, the NTSB is asking, please give them that time. They are working with peer-to-peer counselors, and they just need that time to heal, and they have asked us to mention that in this media briefing, and I would really ask that you respect their wishes and give them that time to really begin to process what they experienced. Now, the cockpit door. We found today that the cockpit door is designed to open during rapid decompression. It is designed to open during rapid decompression. However, no one among the flight crew knew that. They were not informed. So Boeing is going to make some changes to the manual, which then hopefully will translate into procedures and information for the flight attendants and for the crew in the cockpit. As far as the oxygen mask, that we weren't sure if it deployed or if it was stuck, it did deploy. We interviewed the passengers in that row, and they had put the oxygen mask back up in the panel, which was the other thing we suspected, but it did deploy and was working. Now on to systems. Our systems group focused on the cabin pressure control system on the aircraft. This is the auto pressurization light that illuminated that we have gotten a lot of questions on. This system is designed as a triple redundant system with one primary cabin pressure controller. It's a computer system. There is a secondary cabin pressure controller, that's a secondary computer system. And then there's a manual controller. So there are, it's a triple redundant system. That means that if the primary controller fails, the flight crew switches to the secondary controller. If that fails, they can switch to manual. Any one of these systems is fully capable of maintaining safe cabin pressurization. In fact, if either one of the computer systems is inoperative, the FAA allows the operator to continue flying the aircraft. We have verified from the maintenance logs that the redundant system operated as designed on December 7th, January 3rd, and January 4th, going into the alt mode, not needing to go into the manual mode. At this time, we have no indications whatsoever that this correlated in any way to the expulsion of the door plug and the rapid decompression. Now, the NTSB is very thorough, so we will go back and look at the flight data recorder, and we will get data on cabin pressure. And we're also going to download the memory on the cabin pressure controllers. We may have to pull the units to see why it was acting up, but we have asked Boeing for a specialist to arrive tomorrow to work through this, so we can just go through the rest of it. But again, no indication of any correlation between the two. With respect to the ETOPS restriction, Alaska Airlines reported to the NTSB that their internal policy is to restrict aircraft with multiple maintenance write-ups for certain aircraft systems from flying ETOPS flights for a period of time. That's not required by the regulation. That is an extra step that Alaska Airlines put in place. Now, ETOPS stands for Extended Twin Engine Operations. What that means is that ETOPS permits twin engine airplanes to operate over a route that contains a point further than 3 hours flying time, 3 hours for this aircraft, from the nearest airport. And the restriction was put in place per Alaska as an extra step to ensure safety and to allow them to conduct maintenance. As for the structures, I want to start by thanking Bob, who all of the media successfully outed. But Bob apparently was a star with all his students today. I really want to thank the community overall. I can't thank you enough. Every time the NTSB asks for help, every single time the community pulls through. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. I especially want to say thank you to Bob. I'm sure he was a hit at school today, so that's very exciting. We did go out at 7 a.m. this morning to retrieve the door plug. We are still looking for the bottom hinge fitting and a spring. It's a pretty large spring. The fitting is a green circular piece with a hole in it. It's not key to the investigation. This is not something that's key to us determining anything or ruling out anything. We're just fine. But it's always nice to have some of the pieces if you find it. And if anyone does, please call NTSB. Please email us at witness@ntsb.gov or contact local law enforcement. Again, I want to thank local law enforcement and the FBI for helping us also look throughout the early stages of our investigation. I will mention that community members also found today a plastic window frame and a headset and headrest, a headrest, and turned that into the NTSB. So we really appreciate that. Thank you. Now our structures team examined the right door plug. So the door plug on the left is what expelled the aircraft. They examined the right door plug in its installed position today and found no discrepancies. Everything was in place. Now, again, they examined it in the installed position. At some point, they may look at it in the position where you would conduct maintenance, which is 15 degrees down. That's still to come. Now, tomorrow, we also plan to do a 3D scan of the left opening and match it up to models and drawings to ensure that we're not missing anything. We're also going to send components and the door plug back to our lab in DC for further examination. Now, what we did want to provide to everyone today in real time is what broke. We are going to provide what broke. We cannot tell you at this time how or why. We do not have that information. We will have that information. It's going to take time, and we're going to have to analyze the components and the door plug in our lab to be able to figure out how this happened and why this happened. So I'm going to allow Clint Cruikshanks to go through that. Again, Leonie and Clint are the specialists here, and I think it's important that you hear it directly from them so you get the right information.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to give another shout out to Bob. Without him, we wouldn't have this door plug and be able to examine it, so yay, Bob. As you all know, the 737-9 has the provisions for a cabin emergency exit door in the aft fuselage. However, on this particular airplane, there was no door installed in that location due to the passenger seating configuration of the airplane. Instead, there was a plug installed in that opening. That plug is retained in the opening when 12 stop pads on the door frame interface with 12 stop pins on the plug to prevent the door from blowing out of the fuselage. In order to install that plug into the fuselage, you rotate it up so that the door or the plug stop is above the door stop. It translates inboard and then down so the stops then engage. At that point, 4 stop bolts are installed in the mechanism to prevent that plug from translating upward, disengaging those stops. There's also a guide roller on each side, on the upper side of the plug, or on the upper side of the door frame that engages with a guide fitting on the plug to establish the location in the opening. The exam to date has shown that the door, in fact, did translate upward. All 12 stops became disengaged, allowing it to blow out of the fuselage. We found that both guide tracks on the plug were fractured. We have not yet recovered the 4 bolts that restrain it from its vertical movement, and we have not yet determined if they existed there. That will be determined when we take the plug to our lab in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. I know you're all going to have lots of questions on that, and Clint and Leonie will be able to answer those. And just to reiterate, we will be able to determine whether the bolts were there. We can determine that based on witness marks in our lab with much greater capability. We have microscopes and other, what is the word? Scientific equipment. It has been a long day to be able to evaluate help our team evaluate what they're seeing in the door plug. One thing I'll note is that we have offered party status to Spirit Aerospace and to the Machinists Union. Now, this is going to be our last on-scene media briefing. Please contact Media Relations if you would like if you have additional media relations needs. Also, please monitor our website at ntsb.gov. I want to take a few moments, though, and say thank you. Again, I want to say thank you to the community. What an outpouring of support. Incredible. Thank you. We could not do what we do without you. I also want to thank the media. I am very appreciative of everything you do. I believe you play a significant role in improving safety and holding the NTSB and every other federal, state, and local agency accountable for ensuring the safety of others. So thank you for everything you do. Keep it up. I also want to thank our parties. The parties to our investigation help provide the factual information. They are the ones who give us that technical information that allow us to ask all the great questions and dig into the issues But then we move away from the parties at some point, and we do our own analysis without the parties, and we develop our own findings, probable cause, and safety recommendations that we hope will get implemented. And we are not shy, I am not shy, about pushing for implementation, because without those changes, there really is no safety improvement. So that's why we push so hard. Finally, I am very proud of the NTSB team. We always are. I would like to thank the following team members: Adam Hooray, Andrew Buckland, Clint Cruikshanks, Dewan Civilian, Eric Weiss, James Anderson, Jen Gabris, John Lovell, Leonie Benitez Cardona, Marvin France, Matt Fox, Rolando Garcia, Star Bloom, Stephen Stadius, and Zoe Kelleher. I don't know that a lot of people realize, but our agency, we handle all modes of transportation. We have only 437 employees. They are incredible, and we are proud of them every single day. We're a small agency, but we have a really big voice, and we use it to save lives and prevent future tragedies. So with that, we're going to take questions one at a time. I also saw Chris over here jotting down everyone's name. Do not call them. So one at a time, name and affiliation, even though I know most of you now. But go ahead, and Chris, and then we'll come over here.
Chris Van Cleve, CBS News. I'm curious, as we're hearing reports now of both Alaska and United finding loose bolts, and it sounds like you're saying you're not even clear if there were bolts at all in this door. Does the MAX need to be looked at more closely?
Well, first of all, we're really focused on this aircraft. However, we are not shy about going broader than just this aircraft. We need to first and foremost figure out what happened here on this aircraft. If we have a bigger system-wide or fleet issue, we will issue an urgent safety recommendation to push for change. With that said, we are aware of the reports that are coming back from the inspections from United and Alaska and Boeing. Our team is collecting that information, and there will be some follow-up from the inspections. But right now, we're focused on this one, but we can go broader at any time. We don't have to finish the investigation to issue an urgent safety recommendation. We can do that anytime, and we have done that for entire fleets before.
But quick follow-up. If you don't know if there were...
You broke my one-question rule, but I will allow that.
One question too far. If you don't know if there were bolts, and then both airlines are finding bolts that weren't tightened, if you can't trust the manufacturer to tighten those bolts, can you trust them to tighten all the other bolts in the airplane?
Right now, we are focused on the evidence. The evidence tells a story. The components on this door plug tell a story. We have to follow the evidence and see where it takes us before we jump to any sort of conclusions. We cannot speculate. We never jump to conclusions, but we don't speculate. We deal only with facts, and we're going to have to look at this aircraft. But again, we will go broader if we need to.
Associated Press. Can you please explain again what exactly broke? Clint did a good job, but maybe in more plain English, less technical, for those of us who aren't airplane experts. Just explain that, the interaction of the stop plugs and the locks and bolts. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Clint to correct me at any point. There are two hinges on the bottom, those hinges, and there are two roller fitting guides, roller guides. The purpose of the hinges and those guides are to get the door onto the aircraft and to allow it to move outward for maintenance, that outward for 15 degrees. It is the two guides on the top that broke. Those have two bolts in them. Don't know if there were bolts there or if they are just missing and departed when the door plug departed. But it's those two at the top. The bottom hinges were also missing those bolts. We can't make it, we don't know if they were there or if, again, they came out during the violent explosive decompression event.
And are those rollers a part of the door or on the actual fuselage?
It's on the door plug, they're on the, nope, I'm going to just turn it over at this point. Move on.
So the guide rollers are installed on the fuselage. The guide roller tracks are installed on the plug. We found the guide roller tracks were fractured.
So if you imagine these six stop fittings, there's 6 on each side, so it's 12 stop fittings. The purpose of those stop fittings are to prevent the door from being expelled from the aircraft, because there's a lot of pressure inside the aircraft. The pressure outside the aircraft is low, it's higher inside the aircraft. So there's a force pushing outward. So you need something that holds it in place. These 6 stop fittings, there's 6 of them on the door plug and 6 of them on the frame, the door frame. They match each other. So if you imagine high-fiving somebody, they're hitting each other, preventing that door from coming outward. In order to put the door in place, if you put it just right in place, it would hit those stop fittings. You couldn't get it in place. So what you have to do, it has to go upwards, go on the hinge, and then go in. And when you are doing maintenance or inspection, it also comes up and comes out. So that's what we're talking about. Yes, and then here.
Nancy Keys with the Wall Street Journal. Can you tell us how many of the planes on United planes had the loose bolts, and whether there are any other issues on those planes other than loose bolts?
We don't have information on how many of the question is on how many of the United planes had loose bolts. We don't have that information. FAA should have that information, as this is part of their airworthiness directive. They would gather the overall amounts.
And were there other issues besides loose bolts that you know of?
Are there other issues besides the bolts that we know of? We have only heard reports of the bolts, but we're not aware of the extent to what they found. Yeah, here and there.
The doors are with the Oregonian. So with the fractured components, would those have been for certain fractured prior to the disconnection, or could the event have caused those fractures?
I'm going to allow you to answer that one. Repeat the question, though.
The fractures that you found, were they contributing to this incident or a result of the incident?
The question is, were the fractures we found contributing to the incident or as a result? Based on our examination so far, the door translated up and disengaged from the stops, which then fractured the fitting, so it was after it disengaged from the stops.
So then it doesn't necessarily explain what?
Correct.
Here and then here.
Deborah Bloom with Reuters. The FAA warned airlines in August against using the engine's de-icing system on Boeing MAX planes, specifically in dry air conditions, for more than 5 minutes. They said that it could cause the composite inlet surrounding the engine to break off and hit a window or door and cause decompression. On Friday, around the 5 p.m. hour when the incident occurred, it wasn't raining, and the passengers we interviewed told us that they were delayed from takeoff by 20 minutes because the plane was being de-iced. What are we to make of this, and was there any damage to the door or the plane itself that would indicate that the de-icing system could have played a role in the decompression?
Want to address that?
You have relayed a very elaborate scenario, which there is no evidence to support at all. De-icing is a procedure that is done routinely during the winter periods, and there are no indications that is contributory in any way to this event.
Yes.
You talked about, Catherine Cook, KGW News. You talked about interviewing the flight attendants. Could you elaborate on if and when you interviewed the pilots and what that produced?
The question was on what came of the interviews of the pilots. So for the captain and the first officer, they described very loud environment, chaotic. At the time, they heard a bang, and then some pressure changes in their ears. They mentioned that the door had flown open at the same time. A flight attendant had attempted to close it a few times, eventually succeeded in that. The one of their checklists, their laminated checklist, flew out the door when the door also opened. They described it as very loud, windy at the time, and they had trouble communicating. They had trouble hearing each other. They had trouble hearing air traffic control, and they had trouble communicating throughout the event. I will say, once again, excellent job by the entire flight crew, those in the cockpit and those in the cabin, and also air traffic control. Here and here.
Just have a follow-up on my previous question. So just to confirm I'm understanding correctly, those 12 lock points you described,
Stop fittings.
stop fittings, those were not locked in, and because of that, the door plug shifted upward?
No. So the stop fittings, so the question is on the stop fittings and their role. So the stop fittings, there's no locking mechanism on them. Again, it's like saying high five to somebody. They're pressing against each other, or really it's pressing from inside the cabin outward. But it's essentially holding the door in place. The upward motion is one that is needed in order to get the door in place on installation and to move the door outward when 15 degrees during inspection and maintenance. Did you want to add anything to that? Are you good?
Yeah, I think so.
So if
Okay.
the door is bolted in, it should not move up.
It should not move up. If the door is bolted in, bolted in, though, is an interesting term. The roller guides and the bolts on the bottom for the hinges they're not for, essentially holding the door in. They are designed for maintenance and for installing the door. It's the stop fittings that are designed to keep the door in place.
So the bolts don't keep the door in place?
No.
Then what is the significance of it if they're missing?
The 4 bolts in the mechanisms prevent the door from translating upwards.
So if the bolts are there, the door doesn't move up, which means it doesn't fly off.
Yes, by design, if the bolts are there, it prevents the door from translating upwards and disengaging from the stop fittings
And flying off the plane.
and flying off the plane.
Okay.
However, the bolts can break or any number of things which we have to look at.
So when you put the door in, when you install the door, or you're doing maintenance or an inspection, you need movement. But when you're not doing that, you need those bolts so there's no movement upwards. If you didn't allow the door to move upward, you could never get the door out.
So the bolts hold the door in its upright and locked position, so to speak.
Yes.
Such that it doesn't move in a way that could have it exit the aircraft unexpectedly in flight.
Are you okay with that? Yes.
Okay.
So like you were saying earlier that the stop fittings aren't what prevented necessarily, like it's like a high five you described.
Yes.
So the bolts prevented from like on-high fiving.
No, no. So the,
I think I get it.
so, here, we're gonna high five right here. Here's a stop fitting. There's 12 of these, right? Okay, great. This is our moment, John. If you want to open this door, you can't if this is pushing. So if you want to install the door, or if you want to do maintenance and rotate it outward, or
Yep.
push it outward, you can't do it in this position. You have to come up and then bypass those stop fittings in order to come down. Understood? Okay. We did have a question. Here and then there. Sorry. Go ahead.
Kyra Buckley, Oregon Public Broadcasting, NPR. I'm wondering about the door plug that you guys found here in the Portland area, and you're sending it back to Washington, D.C. I'm wondering how it's getting sent back to D.C. to kind of preserve, so you guys can look at it, and then also about how long do you expect the investigation into the why and how should take?
I'm going to ask Clint to address that.
So the plug will be crated and shipped along with some other parts that we are retrieving from the airplane to our lab in Washington, D.C., and we will set up a time to look at those parts that is convenient for our staff and for the parties to the investigation.
Shipped by plane?
Don't know.
Okay.
Probably too large to go by plane, but don't know yet.
And any idea how long the investigation might take?
Our investigations can take anywhere from a year to 18 months.
Now over here.
Claire McMichael, ABC. Wondering if with the more widespread bolt issue that we're seeing, is there any indication how those bolts are coming loose, if it's engineering or torque or something else? And how can we be sure that they won't come loose again when those planes are cleared to go back to the sky?
The question is on the bolts and some of the reports from United and Alaska and Boeing of loose bolts and the extent of that and how you can be assured going forward that that won't expand or happen again. That is something that is, it's a great question for the Federal Aviation Administration. They are really spearheading efforts to inspect these planes and working with Boeing and the operators on how the inspections will be performed and learning what repairs will be made. So that's something that I would direct folks to the FAA for.
Last question?
So just to be sure.
One quick follow-up on this, actually, on the inspect and clear process.
I want to ask about
The NTSB, do you feel comfortable at this point that you know enough about this accident that you feel comfortable the MAX 9 fleet can fly again? I know that you're just looking at this plane right now, but based on what you know now.
Yeah, for the MAX 9 fleet, that's a decision for the regulator, for the Federal Aviation Administration. The NTSB does not ground fleets. That's something that the regulator is responsible for. What we do is we determine our entire mission is not just what happened, but why it happened to prevent it from reoccurring. And we, through our process, our investigative process, we're constantly communicating with FAA, with Boeing, and other parties to ensure everyone is aware of what we're doing. We're often all doing it together because we collect the factual information together, and that enables FAA and others to make long-term safety change.
Thank you. makes them wonder if that's why the door isn't closed.
And it's not right off the top that they don't know. They know what happened, but they don't know why.
Yeah, it was a very scientific way to say the door closed.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's only, the only way for it to play off is if the bolts came off.
Well, there's probably more than one way, but.
The bolts are both
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I was looking at it. It helped.
Good.